Okay, for this unit, we're going to learn how we're going to be able to shoot for exposure and to showcase that you understand how exposure works. And the great thing about this project is that we're going to be working on putting everything that you've done together so far. So your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO are all going to be working together in order to help you create this exposure assignment. So first of all, let me show you the end result. The end result is you're going to have two different subjects that you photograph, and you're going to photograph them with two stops underexposed, one stop underexposed, properly exposed, and then overexposed, and two stops overexposed. So I want you to be able to see the differences between those. Now, when you're looking at exposure and when looking at your camera, there might be some opportunities for you to expose in between a stop. But for the nature of this assignment, I really want you to practice doing an entire full stop so you can start to learn the stops clear. Remember, a stop in photography could be anywhere from you can change a stop by changing three things. You can change your shutter speed. Okay, so for example, going from 1/2000 to 1/4000 is moving at a stop. Okay, you can go to your f-stop, and you could change it from f11 to f8, and that would change a full stop. And then you could also change your ISO, and your ISO, you could go from ISO 400 to ISO 800, and that would change it a full stop. So when you're changing those three aspects of your camera, you're able to get a lighter or darker image as needed. So for this assignment, you're going to be doing one full set like this, and then a second set to prove that you understand it. For your extra credit, you're going to have the opportunity to create a silhouette image and to create a double exposure image. You can do one or the other, or you could do both of them for your extra credit assignment. So let's take a look at some student examples from previous years. So this is a student example. You can see it shows two different subjects to show the variety of the 5 different stops. And this photograph was done in a studio with some lights that were projecting onto the white cloth behind it. And then inside of our kiln room, you can see there is a double exposure here to create a ghost-like image. And then very faintly, there's a second image of the person to the right. The next one was shot inside of the school setting. And this double exposure looks like it was done inside of a school setting as well. And I really like how there's two different positions right here. You can even see this one is further back, whereas the character is closer in the front here. And on this one, this is really neat because it's a bright sunny day, but the way the photographer shot it, exposed for the sun and left the nice glimmer of light around the outside here to create this silhouette. So I think that's a really nice use of silhouette. The next one, the same idea. These are kind of mysterious images here too that you can really play with. And here's a final one. Okay, so before I get started on the logistics of how to work your camera for this assignment, I wanted to share with you the basic concept of working with exposure. So I have for you set up in the classroom just a regular studio light, which is illuminating the white box, the brown box, and the black box, and I have my camera set up right in front of it. And I'm holding with me something called a gray card. So the concept I want to teach you is that for the most part, when you are looking through your camera to your subject, your camera is trying to turn everything in that picture to a medium gray. Okay? So if you were to look through this camera, it's trying to set everything in that picture into a medium gray. And once it's set, when it's deciding, it's averaging everything so that it can balance the light for you to the best of its ability. You have to keep in mind though, your camera does not know what you're shooting. They don't know, the camera doesn't know exactly what it is and how to set the camera. It's going to guess for you if you put it in program mode. But in manual mode, you need to tell it how you want it to think. Okay? So let me just illustrate this for you. I'm going to take away this gray card. Okay? And a brown box has the similar value as a gray card. And when you look at the back of my camera, and I push the shutter halfway, look at the light meter at the bottom. Notice that it sits at 0, or it hovers a little bit to the bottom or to the right. The 1, 2, and 3 are full stops, okay? Either overexposed or underexposed. Right now, the way that I have this composed, I push it halfway, the light meter believes that it is putting this brown box into the gray value so that it has the best exposure. Watch what happens when I move it over to the black box. Okay. I move it over to the black box, and then I push it halfway, and notice the camera believes that it is underexposed a stop and a half. All of a sudden, it's reading all that black that's coming into the camera, and it's like, ooh, 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 nope, 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 nope. That's getting too dark, getting too dark. So the lighting has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that I'm pointing into the direction of a darker box. Now let's find out what happens if I move over to this white box. Okay, and I push it halfway. Notice it's overexposed. The camera is now saying, whoa, too much light coming in here. Whoa, 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 whoa. I think you need to make it darker. So that is the concept of photography. You're putting objects in front of the light meter, and the light meter is reading how much light is bouncing back into the camera. It does not mean that the camera understands what you're trying to shoot. Okay? All it knows, all it's doing is it's reading that light. So you as a photographer have to decide on whether or not you want to change your settings based on what you're pointing it at. Okay? So, that basic concept is what I want you to take forward with the rest of this project. So every year I print out a small photography little cheat sheet for my students that they can take with them on photo shoots. And so you're welcome to download this application, print it small, and keep it into your camera bag. This is just, photographers do all this stuff inside their head because they have a lot of experience. But as you're learning photography, this is a really 4-step guideline on how to process and how to come up to a photograph and think about what your settings should be. So we're going to be working in manual settings. So for the photography cheat sheet, the first step is to figure out where you are and set your ISO. Don't ever leave it on auto unless you're in an emergency situation where you need to. But if you're outside, try ISO 100. If it's like window light or if it's cloudy or in the shade, you might need to move to ISO 400. If you're indoors, you're probably going to need ISO 800. And then if you're doing anything that's using action or you're indoors and using action, anything above 1000 is going to get the picture you need. Now, of course, depending on the lighting situation, you might need to adjust those. So just that's the first thing you should set when you get to your camera and to your scenario. Now, the second one, we're going to skip by that one right now. Everyone should probably just be using auto white balance. We're going to learn about lighting in the next unit. So, but after the next unit, you'll be able to understand that. Then number 3 is, which one is more important in your picture? Is it the shutter speed or is it the aperture? We already got the ISO figured out. Now we need to figure out which part of the picture is most important to you. So yesterday I was doing a photo shoot for senior portraits. And typically when it comes to doing portraits, aperture is the most important part because I really want to blur out the background. Now, if I was doing a portrait where the subject was moving or spinning or something like that, yes, shutter speed would be important. But for the most part, the way I was shooting yesterday, my model was staying fairly still, and I really wanted to blur out the backdrop. So I knew I wanted a short depth of field. So I set my f-stop between these f-stops right here. Okay. So after I've set the f-stop for what I really want it to be, okay, let's say I set it for 1.4. Then I'm going to look down at my light meter and find out where this little notch is on the light meter. If it's underexposed, I'm going to have to add more light to my picture, which means I need to slow down the shutter speed. If it's overexposed and the picture is turning out too bright, what I need to do is I need to cut down on my light. And so I'm going to make my shutter speed faster to cut down on light. So basically what you want to consider is, as much as possible, choose that one aperture or shutter speed that was really important to you and try to get the other one to work within those constraints. If not, you might have to compromise. Okay, so for example, if I really wanted this 1.4 aperture and it wasn't working for me, I tried changing my shutter speed, and unfortunately, my camera didn't go that high, or unfortunately, there wasn't enough light. The last resort could be I could change my ISO if that's possible as well. So try to keep this set, but if you're not able to work within your shutter speed and aperture that you like, then you might need to go revisit your ISO to make it work. Okay, for working with a DSLR, the first thing I need you to do is make sure your camera is set to manual. We're going to start using manual functions for most of our units for the rest of the semester. Okay, so set it to manual. And when you're in manual, you got to think about what your lighting situation is. So right here, I'm working in mostly window light. I've got a little bit of a studio light going on here. I've got some skylights going on. So my light is actually kind of dim. I don't have anything that bright. I'm not outside. So I'm going to first set my ISO to something that works for my lighting situation. If you are inside, you're going to want to probably set it to ISO 800. 800 or 400, maybe 1600. You don't want to go too much higher than that, or else you're going to lose some grain quality. So go ahead and set your ISO, if you're in inside lighting like I am, to about 800. If you are outside, you can set it to 100, 200, or 400, and that should be fine. So you got to, first thing you do in any photography situation is know your light and know how much is coming in and what's going to give you a full range. Try to go as low as you can go. I'm going to stick with 800. I think that's low enough for what I need. Ideally, I wish I could be lower, but in this situation, I'm just going to go with 800. Okay, so I've found out my ISO. That's the first step. Now I'm going to compose my picture. I'm going to do a picture of this white box right here. I'm going to focus it first. And then I'm going to look at the back settings I have. Automatically, my camera has f8 and a 60th of a second. If it's a 60th of a second, I can handhold my camera. So if I wanted to, I could handhold it. For this project, you're going to want to keep it in the same spot for all 5 pictures, or else you won't be able to compare apples to apples. So I have mine resting on top of a table. I'm okay with the 60th of a second. I push my shutter halfway and it reveals my light meter. Do you see that little dot moving? Okay, beneath. I want to try to get my dot to the middle. So I'm going to move either my shutter speed or my aperture. In this case, I'm moving my aperture to 10. Okay, now it's in the middle. This is considered a picture that should be, for the most part, exposed properly. Okay, so I don't want you to take this picture. The first picture I want you to take is I want you to actually go down to the 2. I want you to underexpose it. 2 stops. So I take this picture. Okay, and now, sorry, you get some bad glare there. Now I'm going to go to 1 stop, change my aperture or my shutter speed to -1, take the picture. Now I'm going to shoot one that's on target. I'm going to change my shutter speed again because I'm set up here and it's being a little bit finicky. There we go. There we go. Take the picture. Now I'm going to go overexpose and I'm going to go up to 1. And then I'm going to go up to the 2 and take a picture. So in that case, I changed my shutter speed each time because it was the easiest for me to change on my camera. I want you to do this twice. Choose a second composition, a different object, let's say this black box, and I want you to do the exact same thing. Okay, for the bonus image, we're going to look at how to make a silhouette image. So what I've done is set it up, my DSLR on a tripod. If you don't have a tripod, just set it up on a table, and you want to point it in the direction of something bright. So I'm pointing it in the direction of the window light that I have. You guys could use window light as you like, or you could go outside. The idea with shooting for a silhouette is that you want to make sure you shoot for the brightness, not for the subject. So in this picture, I'm going to make this chair my subject. So I'm going to pull it in front. I'm going to pull it in front of the window. Okay, and I'm going to get it set up in the back here. So let's take a look at my composition. So there it is. Now I'll go ahead and admit this is a horrible composition, but I'm working inside my art studio here, so have a little grace. All right, so let's remember the steps on how to set our camera. Right now I am on manual mode and ISO is 800. That's for indoor light. I'm actually not shooting indoor light. I'm shooting through the window outside. So I want to change my ISO to as low as I can go. I'm going to try 100 because I'm pretty much trying to shoot as if I was outside. And I want to get my light meter to the correct location here. So I really don't care too much about depth of field. And since I'm on a tripod, I really don't even care about shutter speed because my subject isn't moving. So I just want to get my light to be in the middle. And then I'm going to evaluate what it looks like on the back. Aha! Fantastic. I am all exposed for the outside and I'm not exposed for that chair. So that chair is turning out to be completely black. That is what you want. Let me just show you what would happen if I overexpose, just so that you can get an idea. If I overexpose, I can start to see the color, the red color of my chair. That's not what I want to see for a silhouette, and it overexposes the background. Okay, let's see what happens if I underexpose. So this is where it should be in the middle. If I underexpose, the whole thing turns way too dark. it still is silhouetted, but it's not as dramatic. There's not enough contrast. So what you want to do is you want to expose for basically the middle. So you're exposing for the background, not the foreground. Everything is black, and take the picture. Okay, now we want to learn how to do a double exposure. So I'm back in my dark room space where I can easily turn out the lights and it's completely dark. And I am going to be, it's cool to do this with a human face, but I don't have any faces here because I'm all alone. So I'm going to use this skull again as my subject. And I'm going to do 2 photographs, a double exposure inside of one single shot. So I'm going to do a picture of my skull while it's sitting on the white pedestal, and then I'm going to move it over to the brown one to see what I can get. So what do I need to set my camera to? You can put it in black and white or monochrome mode if you want it to have kind of a cool effect that way. That's up to you. You can start to use your creative processes there. So what I want is, I'm going to be using a flash essentially to create my double exposure. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose this this skull 2 different times using a flash. Now, some of your cameras may be already equipped with a double exposure feature. I know there's some Nikons who can do it. Maybe there's some of the newer ones. So check first with your manual and look online to see if there is a double exposure setting on your camera. Mine does not. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to set my ISO to as low as I can go on my manual mode. Okay, and I'm going to want everything to be in focus. So I want a very small aperture. I'm going to go with an f/16 aperture. My f/16 aperture will help me out if I'm slightly out of focus. It'll put things in focus. And now for my shutter speed, it's really important. I'm going to have it be really long shutter speed. So for me, I'm thinking I'm going to do 15 seconds or 30 seconds. How about we go in between? That's up to you though. You can start with 15 seconds or 30 seconds. It depends on how fast you can work. I'm going to try 20 seconds for now. Okay, so I've got my ISO at 100. I got my f-stop at f/16, and I'm doing a 20-second exposure. I cannot expose this until I turn out the lights and I push the shutter. The other thing I'm going to need is a way to do flash. So you all can do flash using your smartphone, or you can use another camera if you have a flash feature. So I'm going to pop up the flash on this camera and turn on, and I'm just going to be using this camera, my second camera, just as a tool. If you have an external flash that you can shoot with, or a flashlight or anything like that, you can try to do essentially the same thing. You got to make sure it's kind of bright though. So on this camera, I turn it on so I can just use it as a flash. I'm gonna turn, make sure it's working first. Oh shoot, you know what I've got it set to? I've got it set to 15 seconds. So that's bad. So I'm gonna turn that back on, change my shutter. Okay, I'm gonna set my shutter to a normal shutter. All right, so now let me test this, make sure it's working. Good, okay, that flash is working. So I turned out the lights. Coming over to my regular camera, and oh, sorry, one more thing before you turn out the lights. I forgot to tell you, it's a good idea to turn your camera onto manual focus. The reason is, in the dark, it's going to be trying to find focus. You've already got it set up, you've already focused on the back, you're good to go. I'm going to make sure I am focused here in the back. All right, I found my focus. I'm good. I forgot to tell you that you do need to have it on manual focus. In the dark, it's really hard for autofocus to work, and it will try to keep finding it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to push it. It's going to go for 20 seconds. Okay. I flashed it once. I'm going to quickly move it over to the new location. Get out of the scene. I'm going to flash it a second time. Okay, I'm going to come back to my camera. It should still be a dark room. It's okay if it's a dark room. Don't turn on the light until it's done. Okay, now let's take a look. I turned on the light. The exposure is done. And let me change the display. There we go. Oh my goodness, cool! Look at that! I've got a double exposure. I've got a picture of a skull over here and a picture of a skull over there. Oh, I like it! I just patted myself on the back. Okay, good call. Go experiment, have fun.